Okay, so today we'll begin looking at Elders in the Church is the title of our lesson for today. We're going to deal, of course, if we have time, with the qualifications of elders, but I wanted today to perhaps begin looking at the names by which elders are referred to in the New Testament. Let me see if I can find those in my notes that I want to get to. Well, I'm not finding it here right off. Let me back up a little bit. Okay. All right, let me give you, there are about at least 3 or 4 or more names, biblical names, to which the scripture refers to the office, if you want to call it an office, or the position of an elder, not the work of an elder. We'll talk about that perhaps later. But it was God who ordained. And notice I pointed out, Sister Rosemary, of course, as we know, it was God who ordained, wasn't it? That local congregation should have overseers by men who are known as, and we'll give you those names, okay? Now, yesterday, by the way, I think I have been mentioning, we had a seminar in Africa. Sister Jackie and Barbara and I were talking about this earlier today as we were having lunch. We had a seminar yesterday in Africa. The brethren there had organized it. The congregation that really led in the organizing the seminar had just recently appointed elders in their congregation. That's kind of unusual in Africa and even here. Do you know that, and I'm just stating facts, that the majority of the black congregations in America do not have elders? And I'm going to leave that there because I don't know necessarily why. I have my thoughts and my opinions, but that's all it is. But I was teaching the brethren yesterday. Now, they had been meeting themselves, and I told you that Brother Jackson had sent me the material that he had used in teaching the congregation there prior to the seminar, of course, in regards to elders and deacons, but I thought it was right down the line. I looked at it pretty carefully. I couldn't see any flaws in it whatsoever, but I sent them some material in response to that, to Brother Jackson, Brother Lawrence, Brother Richard, and several of them there, because we were, again, planning for the seminar, and I had mentioned to them that if it'd be of help, I'd be glad to assist them by means of the internet in teaching several hours, and I did yesterday, and it was kind of amazing. I was telling Sister Jackie, I had thought that we would probably have just a small laptop, Brother Lawrence's computer, that we bought for him 2 or 3 years ago, and that would probably be as large a screen, in essence, as we would have. Well, lo and behold, and this is out in a rural area where this congregation is, but lo and behold, Brother Jackson, who was quite astute, really, he found a hall, as they call it, a room in a technical school there, and they had an overhead projector mounted in the ceiling, just like we do here. Had no earthly idea of that, and they had me on a big screen. And so I taught for about 4 hours or more by means of the internet. Had a great seminar, okay? But as we look at the names of the elders, number 1, the names and their significance. Number 1 is presbyteros. 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 I'll spell it again. It's important that you get that. Presbyteros. That's the Greek name for the one that we'll look at. Presbyteros, 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 okay? Translated into English, it would be presbyter. A presbyter, Presbyter. And from that we get the word elder, which means one advanced in life. An elder, talking about an elder man. A senior, and that's according to Thayer's Greek Interlinear, and Thayer's recognized worldwide, as far as I know, as one of the greater scholars of the biblical Greek language. So the word also applies dignity and wisdom. That's according to Bullinger, who is also a Greek scholar. I'm not a Greek scholar, of course, by any means. I knew a little Greek one time. He was about that high, lived around the corner, and that's all the Greek I know. Used to study Greek some, but I haven't in some time. But anyway, presbyteros, okay? Elder. Now, turn with me, if you will, first of all, to the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 5. 1 Timothy, chapter 5. In verse 1 it says, rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men as brethren, the elder women as mothers, and the younger as sisters with all purity. Now, my question, is he talking about an elder of the church there in verse 1? No, he's not, is it, Sister Donna? Who's he talking about, Sister Donna? All right, an elder person. Now, I was explaining to the brethren yesterday in Africa, and I wasn't being critical, but they know this is the fact, that oftentimes, Brother Robert, they will refer to a man in the congregation or men in congregation, in their congregation, as elders or an elder. They'll say, this is elder, this is our elder, Brother Robert, or whoever. Well, I know what they mean. But in some cases, they have corresponded with people here in America, and they refer to some older men in the congregation as elder, and guess what people here believe? Thinking they're talking about elders in the church. So they are not talking about elders in the church. So I pointed out yesterday, I said, brethren, you need to be aware of the fact and be mindful of the fact that these men are not elders in the church, and when you use that term, speaking to people that don't know what you're talking about or don't know who you're referring to, you're leaving a wrong impression. So be careful, don't do that. And so there in 1 Timothy, it's talking about an elder man, not an elder in the church. Now, Paul does talk about later that the congregation or the preacher has an obligation to rebuke an elder. There it says rebuke not an elder in 1 Timothy 5, but it's not talking about an elder of the church, he's talking about an elder person. Look at the context. It talks about a father and a mother and so forth. So it's not talking about an elder in the church. But we do have an obligation to rebuke an elder that sins. So it's not that we don't have any authority to rebuke an elder if there's a need. In fact, the preacher ought to be the one that helps lead in that, should that ever take place. Now, something else, though, I want to emphasize here on the presbyteros, okay? That is, again, translated elder. That's the word from which we get the word elder, because it means one that is advanced in life, again, an older person, or a senior. Now, we need to discuss that a little bit, because there are a lot of times misconceptions and false ideas and discussions on who can be selected and appointed as an elder. What age? So what age, Brother Robert? What age should we perhaps use as a means of selecting and appointing elders?
Well, I don't know where you could say an age limit, a certain age, but you got to have someone that's not a novice, that knows the Bible and has life that's gonna determine the age,
And that would eliminate whom?
the young.
The younger, okay? I have seen situations, and probably you as well, in my judgment, they had selected and appointed youngers instead of elders. Let me illustrate that, if I may. If you have a congregation, let's just say this congregation, men present, and all of us, ladies as well, and they are all, or at least the majority of them, are older in age, let's just say 60 years and up. You think it would be wise to appoint an elder then that's probably in his 30s or 40s? Absolutely not, okay? He's not old enough, hadn't had enough experience, doesn't have the wisdom, he hasn't had the training, doesn't know the Bible a lot of times, so that would be unwise and unscriptural to do so, because it talks about an older person. That's the meaning of that word, an older person, okay? Not someone who is younger in age. Now, if the situation was different and you had a much younger congregation, and a guy 40 or 50 years old was probably one of the oldest men in the congregation or among the older men in the congregation, it may be a different situation, mightn't it? So you have to take everything into consideration there, okay? But my point is, I think a lot of times, again, in my judgment, we have appointed men as elders when they weren't elder, that is, elderly. They hadn't had enough training and years and experience, okay? Notice that Thayer or Bullinger implied that the word also implies dignity and wisdom, okay? So how do you get wisdom, by the way? You know, we talk about people having wisdom. What does James say about getting wisdom? Pray for wisdom. What is wisdom, by the way?
It comes by knowledge and being able to use that knowledge.
All right. Wisdom is the ability to apply the knowledge, right? You get that by praying. Now, also that comes through, Sister Marilyn, obviously that comes through experience and wisdom. Experience and gaining knowledge from experience and so forth, okay? But James says pray for wisdom, okay? So we need people who are older, the experience, and have wisdom, okay? That's what the word implies. All right, if you have thoughts or questions anytime, speak up if you will. The second word that we see the office of the elder is episkopos. Episkopos, E-P-I-S, K-O-P-O-S, E-P-I-S, K-O-P-O-S. Episkopos is the Greek pronunciation. Episkopos. Episkopos is translated bishop or overseer. A bishop or overseer. An overseer, a man charged with the duty of seeing that things are done by others, are done rightly, and or any curator or guardian or superintendent. That's according to Thayer. And Bullinger notes that this word denotes his duty. So in episkopos, it carries with it also not only just the definition, but his duty. Now let me go back and look at that with you just a little bit. The word is translated, or from that we get the word bishop. There again, we find people, of course, in the denominational world that misuse that, doesn't understand the definition of it. The question, though, is, could we rightly defer to our elders? Suppose we had elders and good qualified elders. Could we refer to them as bishops? Yes, we can. But we need to qualify that. We need to be careful, again, how we use that. If you just say to someone that don't know, maybe someone in the denomination world, introduce someone in this congregation who's one of our elders as one of our bishops, you think that person might have the right understanding or understand what you're talking about? Would not. So be cautious. be cautious how you would use that, even though it is correct. And then overseer. That's the same word, episkopos. A bishop or an overseer. Could we refer to an elder as an overseer? Okay? So what is the duty? Bullinger kind of states, not in detail, but Bullinger states somewhat the responsibility or the duty of a bishop or an overseer. What's his responsibility? Let me read that to you again, and this is not all of it, but this is just a part. A man charged with the duty, so here's the responsibility of an elder, with the duty of seeing that things done by others are done rightly or correctly. So you have an elder, okay, and let's talk about then deacons. We'll talk about that later. You have elders and deacons. The elder's responsibility, deacons or members, but we're using deacons, is to see that that which is given to deacons, as we'll say, a work to be carried out, the elders are to see then that that is carried out rightly and correctly. Let them do it, but see that it is done properly. You remember I told you a number of times, perhaps, where Tammy and Mike attend church a number of years ago when we were in that area. They needed to expand the church building there. The elders called in the deacons, said, we need to expand the church building. You draw the plans, or you get some plans, you do the whatever the work you need to do, bring it to us, we'll look at it, but you build the building. We don't have time to leave the table. We don't have time to leave the work of the elders and build buildings. Guess what, Brother Robert? You won't believe this, but the building got built without the elders, Sister Donna, doing the micromanaging. You know, normally elders will give the responsibility to members or deacons, and then they have to micromanage every little step. That's not the duty of an elder, okay? Give it to someone else. You see that it's done right, but let them do it. That's a major part. One of the major things that we face today in the church, in my judgment, in regards to leadership and especially eldership, elders do not know what they're supposed to be doing. They wind up then doing the work of a deacon, and the poor deacon runs around wringing his hands wondering what he's supposed to be doing, because the preacher normally winds up doing the work of the elder. Totally, we preached against, brethren, listen, we have preached against the pastor system and followed it to a T. Elders not doing their job, deacon doesn't know what to do, and the preacher winds up being the pastor of the congregation. Episkopos, okay? All right, I'll give you the third word. I'll give you all of these right quick. Yeah, we got another 5 minutes or so. Number 3, poimen. 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 It is translated pastor, Pastor, or translated shepherd. Can be a pastor or a shepherd. So then can we refer to elders who are elders as pastor? Can we refer to them as our pastor? Yes, but guess what, Sister Donna? Be careful, right? Because so many people in the religious denominational world, Barbara, you know, they refer to their preacher as whom? As the pastor. And isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing? They don't have a clue what the word pastor means. Never looked it up, never think outside the box. This is just our pastor. He's not an elder, he's their preacher, but they refer to him as pastor, okay? So the word pastor is also translated shepherd. So the elders are shepherds. Now what do shepherds do? From a literal standpoint, what do shepherds do? Watch over the flock, okay? You have in the literal sense, if you have a flock of sheep, and the raven and wolves are about to attack the sheep, what does the shepherd do? Attacks the wolves instead of letting the wolves attack the sheep, right? So he oversees, he cares for. And we'll look at that when we get into the work, but he feeds. was telling Brother Richard yesterday, who was in the audience, I said, Brother Richard, you have sheep. He does, there at the camp. He lives next door to the camp. I said, Brother Richard, you have sheep. Yes. I said, we have a lot of bad dogs, used to have. They've kind of gotten rid of some of them. We used to have a lot of bad dogs there, and I was almost attacked by about 4 or 5 one time, and none of them are vaccinated. They all probably have rabies. Had to have one of the ladies and a little child vaccinated one time, a member of the church there, because they were bitten by one of those dogs. But I said, Brother Richard, you have sheep, and you have those bad dogs. I said, is it your responsibility to protect those sheep from the dogs? And he said, absolutely so. I said, do you ever feed the sheep? He said, I have to feed them all the time. So a shepherd's job is to care for, to protect, to manage, if you please, but to feed the flock. We'll talk about that as Paul does in Timothy. All right, now let me also mention something in regards to Poor Main, okay? Just listen to me. You don't have to write this down at this point, if you will. The word is translated pastor one time, though the Greek word is found 18 times in the New Testament. Not merely one who feeds, but one who tends or guides, nourishes, cherishes, rules, and so forth. That's Bullinger, who is again a Greek scholar. A Jewish shepherd, he says, was at once the ruler, the guide, the protector, and the companion of the flock. That's what Brother McGarvey, J.W. McGarvey, said in regards to the word poimen or shepherd. So the word pastor, by the way, is not ever applied to the preacher unless the preacher was both a preacher or an evangelist and an elder or a pastor. Can you think of anyone that fit that bill? Sister Donna, you know. Who was one of the apostles, was an elder and a preacher at the same time? Peter. Okay. How about John? Could we refer to John as a pastor? No, he wasn't a pastor. He was an apostle, but he was not an elder. Okay. He was a preacher. But Peter was all three. He was an apostle, he was an elder, and an evangelist or a preacher at the same time. Is there anything unscripturally wrong, or unscriptural? If it's unscriptural, it is wrong. Anything unscriptural with a person occupying today, they can't be apostles, of course. That's what we talked about earlier, as you know. But would there be anything wrong for a preacher today also being an elder in the same congregation? Nothing at all wrong with that, okay? However, and you see that quite often anymore in the church, it's okay, it's not unscriptural. Personally, I question the validity of it. Unless I was there, unless I was, really knew the circumstances and I was involved to some extent, I've always said, I don't think I would want to be an elder and a preacher at the same time in the congregation. To me, there's just too much, conflict, not conflict, but overlapping is what I'm trying to say. So personally, that's just my personal feelings. I would not want to be. But scripturally, it of course can be. Not saying that I wouldn't consider that if it's the right circumstances. All right, poimen, okay? We've gotten that. Let's see if there are other terms. These are the terms mostly designated as the same office or group of men, and it is learned from the following scripture that they are referring to. These different terms are referring to the same people, the same office of people, if you want to please. I want to give you those scriptures so you can go home and look these up and know that when you refer to someone as a pastor, you're talking about an elder. When you refer to someone as a shepherd or a bishop, you're talking about an elder. When you put all these passages together that I'm about to give you, then it helps you to understand that that's all the same. You don't have one here and one there in different terms and so forth, or different positions. All right. First of all, Acts chapter 20, verses 17 and 18. Paul said to the Ephesian elders, take heed to yourself and to all the flock over which the Holy Spirit hath made you overseers to feed the church of God. Overseer would be translated from which Greek word I gave you. episkopos, okay? So they were overseers or elders. That's Acts chapter 20, verses 17 and 18. Let's turn then to the book of Titus, if we will. Titus chapter 1. Let's look at verse 5 and verse 7 of the book of Titus, chapter 1. Verse 5. Titus chapter 1, verse 5. For this cause, that is, here's why, Titus. For this cause I left thee in Crete, that's an island, a Greek island, that thou shouldest set in order things that are wanting. What was wanting? Nobody knows? What was wanting? I left you for this reason. Here's what I left you for. Here's what you to do because here's what's lacking or here's what's wanting. All right, look at the next part. Set in order things that are wanting, and ordain elders in every city as I have appointed thee. Paul was an inspired apostle. He had the authority, he had the right to leave Crete or leave Titus in Crete and instruct him to appoint elders in every city. What do you mean by every city? You mean just everywhere there's a town where they have a Church of Christ or whatever, just you go ahead and get some elders there, right? What does it mean by every city?
Every city has a
Congregation. Church, right.
church.
Every city wherein there's a congregation. And see, let me sidetrack there just a little bit. You know that because of necessary inference. It doesn't say, now everywhere you find a congregation in every city you appoint elders. It didn't say that, did it? He said, in every city. But you know that he's talking about every congregation of the Lord's church wherein they have qualified men to be appointed as elders. So it doesn't mean every city, of course. Look at verse 7, though. For a bishop, now notice in verse 1, he uses the word elder. In verse 7, for a bishop must be blameless as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angered, and so forth, okay? So here in the context, Paul left Titus in Crete to lead in the instruction and the appointing of elders, but he uses the word elder in one verse and the word bishop in the next verse there that we looked at. So it's talking about the same office, okay? Now, I'm going to have to end our class here because of time, but let me make a statement you need to think about, okay? I'm going to turn this off because I'm